Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. But with that said, let's get to the topic of the day. And what I would say about the topic of the day really quick is this. It's early to mid-May. And one thing I like about this time of year, we kind of get to do some stuff on this show that we wouldn't generally do if it was like the heart of football season or the heart of basketball season. And I want to do something a little bit different today because, as I was prepping for the show, my initial plan was to kind of go over some of the stuff that's happened in this NIL world since the last time that we spoke. Obviously, the NCAA is planning on pushing back. The lawyers are planning on pushing back on the NCAA. And we have ourselves what is ultimately going to be just a crazy back and forth with NIL. But let's be honest. One, I've done a ton of NIL on this show. I don't want to say it's boring. I actually think it's very interesting. But it's not as though we're not going to get another NIL story tomorrow or the next day or the next day. And it's not as though we're not going to be talking NIL, I don't know, on Friday's show or next week or the week after that. I have a feeling we're going to be talking NIL quite a bit here going forward. And so I bring it up to very simply say that rather than just doing another NIL segment, which I've done a million of, I want to switch gears because there was something that happened in sports so big on Tuesday that it feels like I got to talk about it because all of you are seemingly interested in it. And it comes from the world of football, and it comes from the greatest football player of all time, Tom Brady. Not sure if you heard, been a busy offseason for Tom Brady. Loses to the Rams in the NFC divisional round, retires, unretires. Then we find out that he was trying to finagle his way into an ownership stake with the Miami Dolphins. And so it's been a busy offseason for Tom Brady. But on Tuesday, we finally got clarification where Tom Brady is working and what he will be doing once his NFL career comes to an end. When his NFL career comes to an end, we found out about 9 o'clock Eastern time. Many of you probably was the first thing you saw when you woke up, that Tom Brady is set to become the new face of Fox Sports' NFL draft coverage. He will be the number one announcer in the number one booth, replacing Troy Aikman, who went to ESPN to work for Monday Night Football. And it's kind of funny, right? Because Troy Aikman leaves, Joe Buck leaves with him, and you're kind of wondering, what is Fox going to do with that number one booth? Well, on Tuesday, we find out that Tom Brady, when he retires, it's not going to happen this year. It might not happen next year. But whenever Tom Brady steps away from football, he will be, in fact, the number one broadcaster in the number one booth on Fox in the NFL. Of course, if it was just about Tom Brady signing with Fox, announcing what he's doing after his playing career, well, I don't know that I'd be talking about it on this show. But the reason I am talking about it on this show is pretty straightforward. It is because about middle of the day, we got the dollar amount that Tom Brady is set to make by working as the lead broadcaster on Fox when he retires. And that number is so big, so massive, we got to talk about it. So on Tuesday, probably about, I'd say, 2 o'clock Eastern time, Andrew Marchand reports what the dollar figures, what the amounts are of Tom Brady's contract. And I need to pause, and I need to take a deep breath, because this number, which I know you've all heard, but it's going to blow you away. Tom Brady, on Tuesday, signed with Fox a 10-year, are you ready for this? Drum roll, please. A little quiet, getting bigger. Tom Brady signed a 10-year, $375 million deal to be the face of Fox's NFL coverage. So you talk about just a crazy story with a crazy dollar figure amount attached to it. Tom Brady signed for $37 million a year for 10 years to be the face of Fox's NFL coverage, to which I say, oh my goodness. But to which I also say, I kind of get it. And so this is, I think this is the fun part of doing a show like this is, you get to sit back and react to some of the stuff that I know that you guys and girls care about. And trust me, I can see based on the social media response that you guys and girls care about it. And what's interesting is it feels as though most of the response is exactly the same. Most of the response is, it's cool that you got Tom Brady, but it is absurd. How can you possibly pay him $37 million a year for 10 years, $375 million, when he didn't even make $375 million in his playing career? To which I say, the more that I thought about it on Tuesday, the more that it kind of makes sense. First of all, let me just say this. In the big picture, I am not in the business of telling people how to spend their money, right? Everybody spends money on different things. Everybody spends money on whatever. And it's not my place to say how you should spend your money. So let me give you an example. So that's why the first reason why I have no issue with Tom Brady getting the money that he's getting from Fox. Now, yes, I work for Fox Sports Radio. No, this has nothing to do with that. But at the end of the day, I'm just not in the business of telling people how to spend their money. So let me give you an example. Remember about 3 weeks ago, and it always comes back to NIL. About 3 weeks ago, Saturday afternoon, we all see that tweet from that Miami booster, John Ruiz. Nigel Pack has agreed to a 2-year contract, $800,000 for $400,000 a year to be a spokesperson for whatever the heck my brand is. This is the biggest NIL deal on record. And we all went crazy, and we all went bananas, and probably over the next 2 to 3 days, the number one question that I got from guys and girls that listen to this show or people in the media or people in my business, well, how could you pay that much for a recruit? He's not worth it. There's no way he's going to make his money back, John Ruiz. And what I would say is, look, I think there's a different conversation between will he make his money back and is Nigel Pack worth it to Miami basketball and to John Ruiz? Now, is he really worth it? Are they really going to make $800,000 in revenue off of Nigel Pack, a very nice college basketball player, but not a great one? Probably not. And what I can certainly say is that Life Wallet, that's the name of John Ruiz's company. It just came to me while I'm doing this segment. I don't think John Ruiz's company, Life Wallet, is going to make $400,000 in profit just to make back the money that they're paying Nigel Pack, let alone that they're going to make a profit from actually paying Nigel Pack that much money. But at the end of the day, who am I to tell John Ruiz how to spend his money? It's not my place to say how to spend your money. If John Ruiz wants to spend $400,000 of his hard-earned money to make Miami basketball relevant by signing a player that he thinks will help them do that, then it's not really my place to say. Now, I wish NIL wasn't this way. I wish NIL was more under control. But at the end of the day, these are the rules that we're living under right now. And John Ruiz believes that $400,000 of his money is worth it to go to Nigel Pack to help his team. Can't really blame him. By the way, it's the same in the coaching world too, right? We always hear that you could pay the coaches whatever, but you can't pay the players. I mean, there are boosters that are writing huge checks for coaches that I don't think are worth it. There are boosters that are writing huge checks to get rid of coaches. I mean, there's some booster somewhere in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that is helping write a check to Ed Orgeron for $7 or $8 million a year this year to not coach LSU football. So that's the first reason why I have no issue with Tom Brady making this money. He's clearly worth it to the people that are paying it to him. You might not think he's worth it. I don't know if it's going to create that much more interest in Fox's games that they get that much more revenue. But if Fox is willing to pay him, then it's not for me to say that he's being overpaid. 2, you know who you got to overpay in this, not only in this business, but in this world? Somebody with options. And I feel like this has been the biggest talking point in the NFL outside of the actual on-the-field results for a while now. What is Tom Brady going to do after he retires? Because, my goodness, greatest quarterback of all time, greatest winner in the history of the NFL, boy, oh boy, is that guy going to have options. And boy, oh boy, it ain't going to be cheap to get him. This is a guy that's made $300 million in his career. This is a guy that has, by all accounts, a successful, nutritional, whatever business you want to call TB12. Seems to be doing well. People seem to be spending money on it. He's got a big social media following. He's got his own production company. And so Tom Brady has plenty of options. If he wants to do TV, he can do TV. If he wants to do a weird Manning cast like Peyton Manning is, he can do a weird Manning cast like Peyton Manning is. If he wants to go lay on a beach for 10 years, if he wants to get into ownership, if he wants to be a GM, if he wants to get into coaching, Tom Brady can do whatever you want. So to get Tom Brady to commit 10 years worth of his falls for 18 weeks a year and sometimes much more because Fox has a couple Super Bowls coming in there, you are going to have to overpay Tom Brady, don't you think? Speaking of which, that's another reason. You don't want him to hit the open market. That's the other thing that I couldn't stop thinking about. The reason that this was done in the manner with which it was done was the fact that if it gets out that, Tom Brady might be interested in doing some broadcasting, oh my goodness, then all of a sudden you get in a bidding war. Then all of a sudden Amazon gets involved. Amazon, remember, has those Thursday night games. Yeah, they signed Kirk Herbstreit, but guess what? They can fire Kirk Herbstreit in a second. It's Amazon. They're worth $10 billion. I don't think they're worth 10. I think they're worth like $50 billion. They could write out Kirk Herbstreit's check in a minute, get rid of Kirk Herbstreit, bring in Tom Brady. You think NBC, I know they just, they spent money on Drew Brees. You think they wouldn't push Drew Brees aside to get Tom Brady? You think CBS wouldn't have to have some tough conversations about Tony Romo if Tom Brady's available? And so to me, when I sit there and say, 1, he's got options, like I said, and 2, the last thing you want is for it to get out that he's potentially interested, and then all of a sudden, you get in a bidding war. Speaking of bidding war, you know the one network that I did not just mention? I mentioned CBS, I mentioned Amazon, I mentioned NBC. You know who I didn't mention? How about ESPN? And to me, this is the part nobody's talking about. ESPN, the reason that Tom Brady, the reason that the void is there is because Troy Aikman just left ESPN in their Sunday booth to go call Monday Night Football at ESPN. He left Fox for ESPN. I think I said he left ESPN, but he's going to ESPN. So Troy Aikman just left Fox to go to ESPN. Costs ESPN $18 million a year to get him. Then ESPN said, you know what? If we're going to have Troy Aikman, we got to have a good play-by-play man alongside him. And so they went out and got Joe Buck, his partner for years at Fox, for $15.5 million a year. Now, one, I credit ESPN for that. Listen, I've criticized ESPN for a lot, but they have for years been trying to make that Monday night booth a big deal. Hasn't felt very important since Mike Tirico and John Gruden probably 5-6 years ago. They've been trying a long time to get somebody worth watching into that booth. Now, how much we tune into games to watch broadcasters, that's a different conversation. But it certainly helps, and it certainly makes the game feel big if you have big names in that booth. And so I give ESPN credit. And for people who don't know how all these contract works, and I don't claim to have all the details, but part of getting the biggest games and part of getting Super Bowls, which ESPN now has, is you have to invest back into the product. And so for years, my understanding was the NFL was hesitant to give ESPN Super Bowls or ABC ESPN Super Bowls because they sat there and said, you guys don't care about the product. We can't give you the biggest game and you have some, whoever, and it's no disrespect, but Brian Greasy or Booger McFarland or Jason Witten, get some real people in there. So they spent, $34.5 million to get Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. Why do I bring it up? Well, it's because what I just said. They spent $34.5 million to get Troy Aikman and Joe Buck away. You don't think it's worth paying $37 million to get Tom Brady? Because you have $34 million that would have been spent on the other two. Now you get Tom Brady. Now, to be clear, you still got to pay the other guy that he's going to work with. That's why am I blanking on his name? Kevin Burkhardt. So you got to pay Kevin Burkhardt. But, how much are we talking about Kevin Burkhardt? I have met Kevin Burkhardt once or twice. Seems like a nice guy. What are we paying Kevin Burkhardt? $1.5 million a year, $2 million a year? So for the price of Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady, it's like $5 million more than what you would have paid Joe Buck and Troy Aikman anyway. So people talk about, how can you spend $37 million on Tom Brady? Well, you're not really spending $37 million because you saved $34 million getting rid of Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. So now you put Tom Brady in your main booth with Kevin Burkhardt. If Kevin Burkhardt doesn't work out, you go out and get somebody else. But that's another reason. You saved a bunch of money by not signing the other guys, so now you get to spend it on Tom Brady. And finally, this is the most important part that nobody's talking about. And this is the difference between the guy and girl on Twitter and somebody like myself that actually thinks this through. Do I think Tom Brady's worth $37 million a year? I don't know. But here's the bottom line. Did you see where this announcement came from? It didn't come from a press release. It didn't come from a report from ESPN or the New York Post or Fox Sports or this or that or The Athletic. It came from an earnings call for Fox, okay? Do we know what an earnings call is? It was Rupert Murdoch's son, the guy that owns Fox, announcing it to his shareholders. So the point of an earnings call is you have these big publicly traded companies like Fox, like Amazon, like Google, like Netflix, whatever. And on these earnings calls, you got all your investors, and you got to get them hyped up about, hey, you got all this money invested in this company. We got to get you excited about that. Well, what's going to get you more excited than having the son of the chairman or the chairman himself, Rupert Murdoch's son, get on there and say, guess what? Our biggest property here in the United States is the NFL, and guess who we just signed? No, I'm not talking about this guy or that guy or Brian Greasy. I'm talking about Tom freaking Brady. We got Tom Brady to call the biggest games in the NFL, and I think that's an important part of this as well. According to all the reports, including from Andrew Marchand, he's not only going to be the face of Fox Sports for 10 years in that booth, he's going to be an ambassador for the company. When they have a big golf outing or when they have a big this or when they have a big whatever with the shareholders and the stakeholders and the people that are spending tens of millions of dollars on this company, you know who's going to be there at the front shaking hands and kissing babies? It's going to be Tom Brady. And so to me, this makes perfect sense, and I totally get why Fox did it. And I'll be honest, I'm excited to see Tom Brady in the booth. I don't know when it's going to be. I don't know how good he's going to be. And to be clear, yes, I would probably still be watching Cowboys-Packers on a Sunday, whether it was Tom Brady, Troy Aikman, or somebody else. But I do think this matters. And when you really break it down, I don't think the $37 million was that crazy.